Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we drift into a soft, silver-lit world, a world where the moon isn't just a glowing pebble in the sky, but a meddlesome roommate with too many opinions. You're lying on your straw mattress half asleep when someone knocks at your door, metaphorically speaking. It's not your neighbor, it's the moon. And apparently it has thoughts about your personality, your crops, your children's future, and whether or not your cheese will curdle tonight. You didn't ask for its input. It gave it anyway. In tonight's quiet journey, we're going to explore some of the strangest things people once believed the moon could do. Spoiler, it wasn't just tides and tides of poetry. People feared the moon, timed their duels by it, sued it for crop failure, and even used its phases to decide when to wash their socks. It was healer and saboteur, a wedding planner in Mesopotamia, a silent scapegoat in 17th century agriculture, a pale, floating consultant that no one invited, but everyone consulted. If you were born during a full moon, congratulations, your neighbors were already whispering about your future misfortunes. If your goat stopped producing milk, better check the lunar calendar. And if your wedding got rained out, clearly the moon was jealous. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you're truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background, and together, let's ease into tonight's story. You arrive in this world not to quiet, peaceful darkness, but to brightness. Too much brightness. The full moon is high, indifferent, and shining like a smug coin dropped into a fountain no one made a wish on. It spills its light into your family's single-room cottage, turning every shadow into a whisper, every creak into suspicion. You're wrapped in cloth that smells faintly of damp wool and anxiety. Your mother is exhausted. The midwife is frowning. Not because you're sick, not because anything is technically wrong, but because the moon is wrong. And you, unfortunately, have arrived on its loudest night. Maybe you think that's good luck, celestial light to mark your grand debut. No, it's the opposite. The full moon, in many medieval minds, was an omen, not a gift. It bloated the sky like an overfed goose and brought with it madness, misfortune, and unsettling dreams. Your neighbors will whisper. Not loudly, just loud enough. They'll glance at your mother and mutter things like, shame about the timing, as if you're a party guest who showed up during the wrong tide. Your father tries to act unbothered, but he's already consulting the village herbalist, who also thinks he's a stargazer, a dentist, and possibly a reincarnated goat. He offers to brew you a protective tea made from fennel, milkweed, and 7 sighs. It smells like betrayal and tastes worse. You don't drink it. You can't. You're still a baby. But they spoon a drop onto your lips anyway, just in case your soul is listening. The chickens don't like you. That's not a metaphor. They hiss when you're near. Your grandmother says you have a moon shadow in your eye. You assume this is poetic. It isn't. She once tried to exorcise a cat that blinked too slowly. At your naming ceremony, someone drops the basin of water. It splashes the priest's robe and extinguishes a candle. Everyone freezes. A full moon child with no flame at the ceremony. They'll be talking about that for months. Your name was supposed to be something strong and simple. Instead, it's changed at the last minute to something that sounds protective, ancient, heavy, like a charm carved into a root and buried under a fence post. You don't know it yet, but it means the one watched at night. There's a knock at the door, metaphorical again, but felt by everyone. A distant owl hoots 3 times. The midwife takes that personally. You grow, as all children do, but always with a note of caution. You sneeze during a lunar eclipse. Your mother makes you wear garlic for 3 days. You sleepwalk once, under a moonlit sky, and wake up next to the goat pen. The goats are all staring at you. The village baker swears you cursed his sourdough. Every small accident is noted. Every stubbed toe, every cracked mirror, every day it rains before laundry dries, all traced back to that luminous night when you first cried under too much sky. And the moon, still full, still round, still silent, doesn't apologize. It never does. It just watches. Like it knew you'd be trouble from the beginning. You are not forgotten. That's not the blessing it sounds like. In your village, a place where the pigs gossip louder than the people, you are remembered. Not for any particular talent, not for any noble lineage, and certainly not for anything you've accomplished on purpose. No. You're remembered because of the night you arrived. A night too bright, too still, too full of implication. You might hope, naively, that memories would fade, that the midwife would get old, that the gossip would get tired, that eventually someone else would trip under a ladder and absorb the village's collective suspicion. But no. They remember. The blacksmith calls you Moonborn not kindly, not cruelly, just like he's labeling a jar. The baker makes the sign of the cross whenever you pass his window. He also claims his dough won't rise if you're nearby. This is clearly not your fault, but when his bread collapses like a sad hat, he squints at the sky and mutters about tides. Your mother tries to pretend it's all nonsense, but she keeps a small silver coin under your mattress, not for savings, but for warding. Silver, she says, binds the light. You ask what that means. She doesn't explain. She just changes the straw stuffing again and tells you not to dream too loud. School, such as it is, doesn't help. The village tutor is a man who once studied philosophy and now mostly studies birds from his roof. He insists that lunar children are sensitive to rhythms, moods, weather, goat behavior. You're forced to chart moon cycles with charcoal and note whether you felt unusual that day. You always feel unusual. You live in a village where people believe the moon cursed their butter. And then comes your first fever. Not unusual for a child, but it arrives naturally on a full moon. The healer brings herbs, prayers, and 3 sharp pebbles she insists must be placed near your left foot. Your father tries to help by setting a bowl of water under the window to catch the reflection. You think this is for cooling. No, it's for divination. They stare into it as if your illness might spell out its secrets like ripples in a fortune soup. You recover. But no one celebrates. They simply nod like the moon has spared you for now. You're watched closer, kept from wells during eclipses, given the worst chore on market day, guarding the chickens. And the chickens still hate you. The worst part isn't the superstition. It's that you start to believe it a little. Not loudly. Not in words, but in the pauses between thoughts. You begin to flinch when the moon rises. You stare too long at puddles. You hesitate before speaking on the 14th night of the cycle. And all the while the village watches. They don't dislike you. They don't fear you. They just categorize you. As though the moonlight touched you differently. As though your breath once sinks to a silver pull that never quite let go. You're not forgotten. No one ever forgets a full moon child. You do have a name, a proper one. It was muttered by a priest, scribbled in ink that bled through the parchment, and repeated 3 times over a wet candle that wouldn't stay lit. That name exists in the parish records, but in the village people use other names. Not to your face, of course. That would be rude. But behind hands, behind bread stalls, behind the low hum of gossip that never really sleeps, that's where the other names live. Some are simple. The Lunar One, Moonshadow, Brightborn. They sound poetic, almost enviable, until you realize they're just convenient shorthand for the child who makes us uneasy. Others are less kind. Goat Whisperer, which started after that unfortunate incident with the fence, and 3 oddly synchronized bleats. Luck Shift, after old Mana tripped in the bathhouse and blamed your birthday. And then there's Night Coin, which makes no sense at all, but seems to follow you like a smudge on the corner of a painting, always slightly out of reach, always present. You try not to care. Names are just noise, right? But it seeps in. You walk a little quieter past the inn. You don't wave at the baker anymore. You spend longer near the well, staring at your reflection, trying to see if it looks like someone who deserves nicknames. It doesn't help that your reflection often feels like it's watching you back, blinking a fraction too slowly, too knowingly, like it's heard the rumours and might even believe them. There are stories, of course. Every village has them. One is about a boy born under the wolf moon who spoke in riddles and vanished during a harvest dance. Another tells of a girl whose hair never dried, not even in summer, and who could silence dogs with a glance. You don't have these powers. You barely have consistent socks. But the stories hang around your head like cobwebs you can't brush off. You once asked the priest about your name, the real one. He looked startled, then gave you a long look, the kind normally reserved for cracked windows or uncertain soups, and said, "Names have weight, especially when given in moonlight." That helped exactly no one. Sometimes, people expect you to behave strangely, to mutter to yourself, to stare too long at clouds. And when you don't, they look disappointed. It's as though normality is the wrong performance. So eventually you begin to lean into it, a little. You tilt your head when you listen. You speak softly when the moon is full. You wear grey more often. And once, you brought a frog to the harvest festival just to see if anyone would mention it. They did. The names multiply. They always do. Some whispered. Some etched on fence posts. Some left in the form of trinkets on your doorstep: feathers, bent nails, a single sprig of rosemary. You still have your real name. You just don't hear it much anymore. It's not that the moon keeps you awake. It's that everyone thinks it does. So no one really sleeps. On full moon nights, your village becomes a place where eyes stay open longer than they should, and every creak of wood is catalogued like it might mean something. The dogs howl more, or maybe they just sound louder because people are listening for them. The chickens rustle like they are rehearsing a small, confused revolution, and the shadows stretch across walls with an opinion about everything. Your parents try to act normal. Your father snores a little too pointedly. Your mother tosses and turns like she's trying to make the straw mattress develop a personality. No one says it aloud, but every time the moonlight spills through the hole in the shutter, someone checks to see if you're still in bed. You are. You always are. But they check again. You try to sleep. Truly, you do. But there's something about the way the light falls silver and soft like spilled milk, except colder and with judgment. It does just light the room. It occupies it. Like a guest who arrives too early and brings their own chair. You bury your head under the blanket. You hear the wind sigh. You peek out. The moon is still there, round and distant and weirdly smug. You once tried explaining to your uncle that you weren't affected by moonlight, that you didn't feel different, that your dreams were mostly about lost boots and confusing soup. He nodded, then handed you a pouch of dried sage and said, "Keep it under your pillow, for clarity." You asked what kind of clarity. He said, "The kind that keeps the goats from speaking." You didn't press further. On these nights, even your dreams feel different. Not darker, just oddly organized, like a librarian had rearranged your fears. You wake with vague impressions. A tunnel that hums, a field with no sky, a mirror that refuses to show your face. Normal things. Perfectly fine. Nothing worth mentioning. But you still keep a rock beside your bed, just in case. Not for protection, but because someone once said moonlight doesn't like granite. You don't know if that's true. You haven't tested it. You just hope the moon believes you have. Your siblings tease you, of course. That's their job. One draws a moon on your forehead while you nap. Another tells visitors you sleep with your eyes open. A third insists you once spoke fluent Crow. You deny it all, but the denials don't travel as far as the rumors. You can't outpace a good story, especially one that sounds more interesting than the truth. The truth is simple. You don't feel magical. You feel watched. Not dangerously, not cruelly, just continuously. Like you've become the village's midnight hobby. And every time the full moon returns pulling at tides, cows, dreams, and dinner plans, it tugs at you too. Just a little. Just enough to remind you, you're still the child born when everything was too bright, too quiet, and just slightly wrong. You don't have a calendar, not really. What you have is the moon. It does not hang politely in the background like a decoration. It dominates. It waxes and wanes with the subtlety of a drunk uncle at a wedding, loud, present, difficult to ignore. And somehow, every time it grows full, your name comes up again. Not shouted, not sung, just passed around in small nods and offhand mentions, like a jug of suspicion at a very quiet dinner. The village keeps track. Of course they do. They don't write it down. That would be too formal, too obvious. But they remember. Every 28 days or so, when the moon rounds out like a smug cheese, someone remembers something you did that was strange. It doesn't matter if it was actually strange. It only matters that it happened under that pale, persistent glare. You picked nettles at night once. The next day, a cow gave sour milk. Connection? No. But correlation is close enough for gossip. You tripped during church once. The priest lost his place in the sermon. Someone's bread didn't rise. A child got a nosebleed. The full moon hovered like a pale referee over it all. You learn to track the lunar cycle without trying. You feel it in the air. Not because you're magical, but because the village is. Their whispers rise like smoke around the full moon. Their glances shift sideways. Their hands grip tools tighter, and they double knot the chickens just in case. Even the dogs grow a little more philosophical. They sigh more often. They tilt their heads when they look at you. The baker, ever helpful, starts giving you free crusts on moonlit days. Not the good part, just crust. You take it anyway. Bread is bread. Even bread that tastes like it's hiding a secret. Your siblings joke that you're on a lunar schedule. You don't misbehave every day, one says. Just predictably. They think it's funny. You think about sleeping in the root cellar. The village herbalist has her own theories. She says the moon tugs at fluids. Blood, sap, milk, misfortune. She once drew a chart on the back of a sheep's skull to prove her point. It was difficult to read, mostly because sheep skulls are not designed for data visualization, but you nodded. She gave you a pouch of dried moth wings, tied with twine, to carry on moon nights. You carry it. It doesn't help, but it flutters faintly when you breathe near it, which is probably not ideal. You wonder sometimes what it would be like to be born on a different night. One with a sliver of moon, or no moon at all. Would your name be different? Would the bread rise? Would the chickens finally stop glaring at you? But then you look up. The moon is full again. Of course it is. And the baker's wife trips on her own shoelace, curses in 3 languages, and glares at you as if the lace was your idea. You sigh. You weren't even near her. Still, the calendar turns. The moon returns. And so does your reputation. You're not invited to the wedding. That's not surprising. It's not even insulting. The couple is young, the families are tense, and the moon is almost full again. No one says it, but the guest list was carefully designed to include everyone except the village's most inconvenient lunar born. You tell yourself you didn't want to go anyway. Weddings mean shouting, pickled beets, and distant relatives trying to guess your height based on your posture. But then, someone gets a rash. Specifically the bride's cousin, who claims she touched the hem of your tunic in the market 3 days earlier. Coincidence? Sure. Logical explanation? Possibly. But the timing is suspicious, and so are you. Your mother sends you to the forest to gather herbs not because they'll help, but because she thinks you could use the exercise. Also, it's safer if you're not around. You walk the path with a basket and a vague sense of exile. The trees don't judge you, at least not loudly. The moss is damp, the ground smells like leaf rot and resignation, and your boots fill with mud, because of course they do. You find mint, stinging nettle, and something the herbalist once called possibly cursed but useful in moderation. Into the basket it goes. Back in the village, things have escalated. The wedding was nearly cancelled after the groom sneezed twice. An owl flew over the church roof. A dog barked and then immediately fell asleep, which is somehow worse than barking continuously. Everyone is sure it's a sign. Of what they're not sure. But signs rarely come with captions. Your name is mentioned. Not loudly, just in passing. A neighbour wonders aloud whether the bride was born under a waning moon. Someone else mutters that it doesn't matter because he already walked past their window last night. You weren't near their house. You were home, playing with a particularly judgmental cat. The next morning, your door is sticky. Someone has drawn a charm on it in berry juice, and something that smells like spoiled jam. It's meant to protect against curses, which is ironic, since stepping in it nearly curses you into a twisted ankle. You scrape it off with a stick and go about your day. The stick breaks. At market, the apple seller offers you a discount. You hesitate. He never offers discounts. Then he says, "Just don't touch the plums." You nod, say nothing, and pick the least bruised apple. It still smells like suspicion, and maybe thyme. You wonder what it would be like to live in a village where people only judged you for your actual mistakes, where stepping on someone's foot didn't result in whispered consultations with lunar charts and pebbles arranged on windowsills. You imagine a day without someone glancing at the sky when you cough, just once. But here, under this moon, that's not the story. You're the odd child of the full moon. You were born inconveniently. And that's a label that tends to stick harder than berry jam on a cold wooden door. You find the healer's journal purely by accident. You're meant to be cleaning her shelves, a task offered to you with the cheerful insistence of someone who does not expect you to say no. The shelves are not so much organized as they are quietly collapsing under the weight of jars, bundles, stones, and things that hum when touched. You move slowly, partly out of caution, partly because you suspect one of the roots in the back row is watching you. Then you find it a battered book wedged between a jar of pickled beetle legs, and something labelled definitely not a toe. The cover is soft from use. The spine is held together with string and one extremely determined beetle wing. You shouldn't open it, so of course you do. The handwriting is cramped and suspicious. Recipes for tonics, notes about dreams, scribbled observations of villagers including you. The first mention is brief, full moon birth. Potential atmospheric influence, that seems fine. Then, later, unusual luck patterns. Possibly magnetic. Test with iron filings. You are not magnetic, probably, but now you're unsure. The entries continue. Child spoke to bird. Bird did not reply. Still noteworthy. You raid on. Your name appears again, and again, and again. Always linked to something that someone else did, but that somehow still loops back to you. A neighbour trips, it's logged. A potato rots prematurely, noted. A child sneezes 3 times in rhythm, possibly your influence. No one asked the child if they just had a cold. You close the book gently, as if it might bite. Your hands smell like herbs and dust and faint betrayal. The healer walks in. She looks at the book, then at you, then at the jar of beetle legs. She says nothing, just plucks the book from your hands and places it back, not in hiding, but exactly where it was before, as though your reading it was just part of the experiment. Later, you try to act normal. You help stir something that smells like burnt onions and lost hope. You grind dried roots into powder. You organize pebbles by shape. The healer says nothing, but every time you glance her way, she seems to already be watching, not with malice, not with concern, just with interest. The kind of interest normally reserved for mushrooms that glow when they shouldn't. You ask, eventually, why she writes about you. She says, because no one else notices the patterns. You ask if the patterns are real. She says, they will be, if people believe them long enough. Then she hands you a pouch filled with something that rattles, tells you it's for social alignment, and sends you home. The pouch smells like old pennies and mint. You carry it anyway. That night, the moon is nearly full again. Someone drops a bowl. A fox howls. You stub your toe on the doorstep. The pouch does not help. Nothing rattles, except your patience. You sleep poorly, because the sky is too bright, the villagers too silent, and your name now appears in a book that hums when you breathe on it. You hate market day. Not because of the crowds, though they're terrible, or the smells, though they're worse. It's because on market day you can't hide. Everyone is there. Everyone is alert. And if the moon is full or almost full, then everyone is also prepared. For what, you don't know. But they brace, as though you might spontaneously combust into prophecy near the fish stall. The stalls are the same as always: dried beans pretending to be fresh, wool that smells like confusion, root vegetables displayed with the pride of someone who's forgotten what joy tastes like. But your arrival? It shifts things. Subtly. A ripple. The baker's assistant whispers to her apron. The butcher casually sharpens his knife with a little too much eye contact. The goat seller makes a gesture involving 2 fingers, a copper coin, and something you're pretty sure was invented just for you. You try to browse. You pretend to care about onions. You examine a guard with the intensity of someone considering philosophical alliances, but none of it helps. The moon is coming full tonight, and your presence at market is not seen as commerce. It's seen as a warning, or a rehearsal. Then someone drops a melon, not a small one. A massive, dramatic, overripe melon that splits on the ground like a prophecy nobody asked for. The juice spreads. A child slips. A dog barks 3 times. Someone shouts your name not in accusation, but as if you are now expected to do something. You do not know what. No one gives you instructions. The melon was not your fault. You were holding a turnip. Still, people glance at the sky, then at you, then at the sky again, as though the moon might offer a footnote or clarification. It does not. It just shines, mutely smug, like a cat who knocked over something important and refuses to acknowledge it. The rest of market day unfolds like a clumsy omen. A horse gets loose, which is apparently also your fault. Someone burns the lentil stew at the soup stand. The priest sneezes. Twice. You are blamed for at least one of those things. By the time you return home, your boots are coated in market shame. Not dirt shame. It clings. You consider soaking them overnight, but you know by now that water doesn't scrub reputation. At dinner, your father mentions casually that it's a powerful moon tonight. Your sister coughs into her bowl. Your grandmother squints at you like she's forgotten who you are, but suspects it wasn't good. You chew slowly. The stew is bland, possibly on purpose. Too much spice might summon attention. Later, you hear neighbours muttering prayers. You hear doors being locked. A chicken squawks once, ominously, and the sky remains clear. The moon will rise fully by midnight. You don't go out. You don't light a candle. You sit by the hearth, pretending not to hear your name passed from one window to the next like a rumour too tired to die. You are, technically, asleep. Or at least you're pretending to be. You've learned over the years that pretending to be asleep is sometimes more restful than the real thing. Your blanket smells faintly of smoke, old lavender, and something your little brother definitely spilled but never confessed to. The straw mattress rustles each time you exhale too deeply. The fire is low. The room is quiet. And yet you wake, not from a sound exactly, but from a sensation like being observed by something wearing socks. It's a soft kind of alertness. You open one eye. There are 3 figures in the room, human-shaped, breathing. Familiar. It's your uncle, the baker's apprentice, and the girl from down the lane who once licked a frog on a dare and now claims she hears colours. They are holding a candle. It flickers slightly, not because of wind there isn't any, but because it too seems unsure about this situation. The 3 of them are whispering, gesturing, and laying something on the floor. Salt, maybe. Or oats. Possibly crushed barley and vague intentions. You pretend to stir, but not too much. You need to know what they're doing. They are, in fact, drawing a circle. Around you, it's not very even. One corner of it is clearly more of a triangle. The girl apologizes to the floor and adjusts it with a spoon. Then comes the chant. Not a real chant they didn't rehearse, but something muttered with the rhythm of people who feel slightly guilty but deeply curious. The words don't matter. What matters is the fact that your cousin is now waving a sprig of rosemary over your head while humming a tune that might have been a lullaby if it didn't sound so aggressively suspicious. They're not trying to hurt you. That's clear. They're trying to check something, like testing a weather vane, like poking a pie to see if it's done. You are the pie. Eventually, the candle flickers harder. This, apparently, is enough proof. The girl gasps. The apprentice says, "I knew it." Your uncle says nothing, but pockets the rosemary, which feels like cheating. Then they tiptoe out, leaving the circle half scuffed and your dignity fully under review. The next morning, no one mentions it. Your uncle smiles too broadly. The apprentice gives you an extra bun, then takes it back. The girl nods once, like you now share a secret that neither of you agreed to. You don't bring it up. If you do, they'll deny it, or worse, confirm it. You sweep the remains of the circle out the door. The oats scatter, if they were oats at all. You hear someone mutter a blessing behind you. You ignore it. That night you can't sleep. Not because of the moon, but because you keep imagining the phrase "one knew it," even though no one explained what it was they knew. The candle flickers again. You blow it out. The dark, at least, is honest. You decide to prove money. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of someone who's tired of being a conversation topic rather than a participant. You are going to have a normal day. That's it. That's the plan. Just a simple, boring, uneventful day that involves chores, polite nods, and zero supernatural implications. You wake early, not because of the moon, but because your roof leaks and the drip near your left ear has a punctual personality. You dress quickly. You wear brown, the universal signal for "please don't notice me." You skip breakfast because the porridge has developed a film thick enough to qualify as a minor deity, and you don't want any more spiritual attention. You carry water from the well. You chop kindling. You help your neighbour rethatch a section of her wall that collapsed, not from curse or omen, but because time does that to mud. People see you, they nod. No one makes the moon's sign. No one blesses themselves twice. One person even says, "Nice weather." You agree. The clouds are mild. The breeze is indifferent. You feel unnoticed. And it is beautiful. Until the chicken. You don't know whose chicken it is. It's not yours. It's not even from your street. But it appears. Bold, fast, slightly unkempt, and determined. It flaps toward you like a herald of nonsense. You try to move. You step back. It follows. You dodge. It circles. You speed up. It jogs. You stop. It pecks your boot. A child sees this and screams. The moon child commands the birds. You do not. You want to say so. But the chicken chooses that exact moment to hop onto a barrel and squawk 3 times, once to the north, once to the sky, and once directly at the blacksmith. The blacksmith drops his hammer. The village turns. You are now the center of attention. Again, you try to explain. I didn't train the chicken. It sounds worse out loud. I didn't summon it. Now you sound like someone who could have, but didn't this time. You slowly back away. The chicken follows again. Your neighbor makes the moon sign. Twice. The baker mutters something that rhymes with bewitched. The priest sneezes. Just once, but it's enough. You go home early. You sit at the hearth. You light a candle. It burns unevenly. Of course it does. The chicken is gone, probably. You're not sure. You suspect it's under your bed, drafting a second act. You take out the pouch the healer gave you. It smells worse today. You hold it like a question. You put it back like an apology. That night, the moon is full again. It climbs the sky slowly, like a guest arriving late to a party it planned. It shines on your roof, on your door, on your name whispered in houses, where no one's quite sure what they believe, only that they believe something. You wanted a normal day, and for almost 4 hours you had one, but then the chicken happened, and now your legend has grown. Again. You're not a scholar. You don't have scrolls or stars painted on your ceiling, or dreams that smell like philosophy. You have a field. Just one. It's not large. It's not noble. It's slightly sloped, mildly resentful, and prone to growing rocks instead of anything you can eat. But it's yours. Mostly. The village priest insists all land technically belongs to the heavens, but the heavens haven't lifted a ho-ho in years. You rise earlier than the roosters, earlier than your common sense, and you work. Every day. You till you scatter seeds, you mutter at worms. Your hands are cracked like old bark. Your back makes noises now. Not metaphorical ones, real audible noises, like a cupboard groaning under the weight of too much pickled cabbage. But this is what you do. This is your life. Or at least it was, until the crops stopped listening. You noticed it first with the barley. It sprouted, curled, and gave up. Then The peas' dramatic little things grew one leaf and immediately fainted. The turnips never arrived at all. You dug where they should have been and found only earth that smelled slightly offended, as if it had tried and been rejected. You did everything the same. Same planting rhythm. Same muttered encouragement. Same avoidance of the cursed patch near the old stump. But nothing grew. The other farmers shrugged and offered suggestions. More manure, maybe. Fewer complaints. Less moonlight. That last one stuck. You hadn't thought about it before. The moon had always just been there, hanging like a slow coin in the sky, changing shape without permission. But then you started noticing things. The way the crescent moon always seemed to rise just before your beans wilted. The way it hung there, thin and smug, like a knife that didn't need sharpening. You mentioned it to your neighbour. He nodded too fast. He said he'd heard of such things a cousin's cousin, downriver, whose pigs went barren every time the crescent dipped west. He didn't have details. He never does. But it was enough. You start watching the moon. You make a chart, not a fancy one, just marks on wood. Crescent, half full. You plant under the full moon. Nothing. You try the waxing gibbous. Slight improvement, one bean survives. But the moment the crescent returns, that bean sags like it's lost the will to legume. You begin speaking to the moon directly, not politely. You accuse it of sabotage. You do this while holding a wilted leek. The symbolism is unintentional. Eventually, the priest gets involved. He asks why you keep throwing cabbage at the sky. You explain. He listens, then offers a prayer, which involves lavender, water, and humming. It doesn't help. You try a charm made of braided wheat and salt. It rains for 3 days. On your house. Nowhere else. The other farmers start avoiding your field. They say it's moon-touched. You try to argue. Then the beans catch mildew shaped like a crescent. You stop arguing. The moon, of course, does nothing. Just hangs there, crooked and silent, watching your fields like it's reviewing a failed recipe. You write a letter. This, already, is suspicious. Farmers don't usually write letters, not unless a cow wandered into a monastery or a marriage needs cancelling. But you do it anyway. Because something has to be done. You've accused the moon out loud. You've made charms out of desperation and broomed straw. And now, you've decided that perhaps bureaucracy is the only remaining magic. The scroll isn't fancy. It's pieced together from 3 slightly damp sheets of parchment, glued with boiled wheat paste and ambition. Your handwriting is uneven, shaped more by dirt-stiffened fingers than formal schooling. But you write, carefully, furiously, determinedly. It reads to the local magistrate, or other person of celestial authority. It has come to my attention that the moon, particularly in its crescent state, has acted against the interests of my field, my vegetables, and by extension my survival. I believe it to be deliberate. I request intervention. Sincerely a farmer of reasonable disposition, and no surviving beans. You dry the scroll by the hearth, but it curls anyway, as if even the parchment disagrees with your argument. You flatten it with a rock and pray it doesn't absorb your defeat. The messenger agrees to deliver it. He's 14, possibly 12, and smells like sheep and overconfidence. You watch him vanish down the road, scroll under his arm, trailing breadcrumbs and destiny. 3 weeks pass. You plant lettuce. It wilts. You mutter at the moon again. It's a crescent. Of course it is. Then the messenger returns. He's sunburnt, out of breath, and carrying a responser scroll that is cleaner, larger, and smells faintly of ink and someone else's authority. You unroll it slowly, heart pounding like a suspicious drum at a festival no one enjoys. It reads, "Dear concerned agrarian, the moon is not under our jurisdiction. Respectfully, Office of Agricultural Oversight. 3rd Region, that's it. No suggestions. No compensation. No instructions. Just 6 words that essentially translate to not our problem, but with a wax seal. You stare at the scroll, then at the sky. The moon, yes. A crescent is already hanging there like a half-finished sentence. You consider sending another letter, perhaps to the priest, or the stars, or anyone who might listen without offering lavender and unhelpful humming. The villagers predictably laugh. Not cruelly, just the kind of laughter people use when they want to seem supportive but also think you've lost a debate with the atmosphere. You are now the farmer who sued the moon. That is your name now, not aloud, but whispered, the way people whisper about sheep who fall in wells or bread that bakes itself too quickly. You keep the scroll, not because it helps, but because defeat deserves documentation. The field is still empty. Your bean count remains 0. And the crescent moon continues to smile its thin, crooked smile, not as a friend, not even as an enemy, just as a very distant bystander who's already moved on to ruining someone else's lettuce. It starts with the goat. Not your goat. Yours ran away weeks ago, likely out of spite or artistic restlessness. This is your neighbor's goat, a sour-faced, yellow-eyed creature with a beard that suggests philosophical opinions and a temperament best described as non-compliant. Normally, the goat sleeps at dusk folded in hay, snoring like a broken bellows. But not tonight. Tonight, the goat is awake, watching the sky. You notice it while fetching water. The moon, a sharp little crescent, thin enough to be mistaken for a careless scratch on the black fabric of night, glints in the goat's eyes. You try to ignore it. You have chores. You have turnips to not harvest. You have dignity to maintain. But the goat won't stop staring. You return with the bucket. The goat hasn't blinked. The next morning, the rumors start. The goat was heard whispering. Not words. Exactly, just unsettling goat noises delivered with rhythm and intent. Someone says it tried to climb the priest. Another claims it walked backward for an hour and drew a symbol in the dirt with its hoof. You investigate. The dirt pattern does vaguely resemble a spiral, or possibly a snail that died dramatically. The villagers are convinced. The moon has begun affecting the animals. You attempt reason. You stand in the village square, mud on your boots, turnip-stained hands clenched, and say calmly, "It's just a goat." Silence. Then someone mutters, "That's what it wants you to think." You lose the debate. The priest organizes a night vigil. Not for prayer, for observation. The village gathers in the fields with candles, blankets, and a nervous loaf of bread. Everyone stares upward. The moon obliges, curved and pale, dragging a soft light across faces that are not ready for clarity. The goat is present, naturally. Someone's tied a ribbon to its horn in case symbolism is needed later. Midnight comes. The goat yawns. The priest falls asleep. A child sneezes. You wait for something to happen. Nothing does. Not really. Except that when the candles go out, the moon seems brighter than before, and your bucket left near the well is full of water, even though you're sure it was empty. You retrieve the bucket in silence. It's cold, like moonlight soaked through metal. You touch the handle. It hums. Or maybe your fingers are just tired. The next day you try to talk to the herbalist. She's busy boiling something that smells like shoe polish and ambition. You explain the goat, the vigil, the bucket. She listens, stirs the pot, and says, "Sometimes the moon just wants to be noticed." Then she adds fennel seeds and refuses to elaborate. You go home. You check the bucket again. The water's gone. The goat, however, is in your yard now. It's chewing your broom. Slowly. Thoughtfully. Like it knows something about you that you don't know yet. You glance at the sky. The moon is already rising again. You make a decision. Bold, definitive, ill-advised. You will no longer acknowledge the moon. Not its phases, not its glow, not its casual attendance at every single mistake your life insists on making. You decide this while chewing on bread so stale it might legally qualify as a building material. The bread cracks slightly as you think. So does your resolve, but only a little. You begin your moon ignoring campaign with small gestures. You no longer look up when the evening falls. You angle your bed away from the window. You tell yourself the shine on the wash basin is just from the lantern, not from that smud curve peeking over the treetops like it's listening in. You walk through the village with your eyes firmly on the ground, which earns you 2 stubbed toes and 1 startled duck. Still, you persist. The village doesn't make it easy. The blacksmith carves a tiny moon on every horseshoe now for balance, he says, but you know it's for spite. The baker has started calling his flattened rolls lunar bites and claims they're inspired by you. The herbalist gives you a salve that glows faintly under certain lighting and refuses to explain why. You say thank you, and then bury it under a turnip for safety. Even the weather seems to mock you. Cloudy nights arrive just before the new moon, hiding the one phase that never gets blamed for anything. But when the crescent comes back up, then the sky clears, and the moon winks like a chandelier with an agenda. You try not to react. When the chickens walk in a perfect circle, you turn away. When the milk sours exactly at midnight, you blame the bucket. When your boots vanish and are found hanging from the well's pulley rope, you thank the wind and say nothing more. But the effort wears on you. Ignoring the moon is like ignoring an itch on the tip of your nose during a sermon. It becomes louder the more you try to pretend it isn't there. You find yourself dreaming of circles, bright ones, pale, empty spaces in the sky that pull your gaze even while you sleep. Then one night, the moon goes bright and bold, not a crescent, but swollen halfway. You catch yourself glancing at it, just once, just to check if it's ignoring you too. It isn't. It shines brighter. Not aggressively, but just enough to let you know it noticed. You mutter something rude under your breath. A frog croaks in agreement. The next morning, your turnip patch is half dug up. The goat is back, and this time it's sitting on your doorstep like it belongs there. You step over it. It doesn't move. You both ignore each other professionally. You've tried rituals. You've tried letters. Now you've tried silence. The moon has remained unchanged, unimpressed, and somehow more present than ever. You realize with grim clarity that you can't win, but that doesn't mean you'll stop trying. You pour a bucket of water over your cabbages. The moon reflects in the puddle. You don't look. But you know it's waving. The breaking point is not thunder or fire or a scream in the distance. It's your turnips. They vanish. All of them. You go out one morning to check the field. There should be 27 small, squat, slightly judgmental, but there's nothing. Not a single root. No stalks. No holes. No farewell notes. Just disturbed soil and the lingering smell of vegetable betrayal. You fall to your knees. It's not dramatic. The ground is damp and your knees are tired, and standing suddenly feels like something only optimists do. Your neighbor strolls by. He sees the empty patch, nods solemnly, and says, "Must be the moon." You don't respond. You're afraid that if you open your mouth, your scream will curdle the milk in every house within 5 miles. So you dig, not with tools, with your hands. You claw the earth, hoping to find at least one surviving root, one lump of defiant starch, one humble witness to whatever absurd cosmic theft occurred during the night. Instead, you find a small, perfectly smooth stone. It's shaped like a crescent. Of course it is. You hold it up. It glints, faintly, even though the sun is behind clouds and your patience has expired. You walk to the village square. You don't plan to. Your feet just do it, dragging you forward like the rest of your body is a particularly stubborn cart. When you arrive, the baker is shouting about flour prices. The priest is discussing theology with the chicken. The blacksmith is asleep with his eyes open. Normal day. You raise the stone. No one asks what it is. They all know. That's the worst part. No confusion. No surprise. Just quiet nods and a few whispered prayers to saints that specialize in celestial grievances. You declare, in a voice that shakes but does not break, "The moon stole my turnips." No one laughs. Not this time. The priest steps forward. He clears his throat. He begins a speech. Something about the unknowable will of the heavens, the moon as a symbol, not an agent, and how some mysteries are best left unresolved. It sounds rehearsed. It probably is. You stop listening halfway through. Your eyes drift skyward. The moon is not visible. It's daytime. But you feel it, like an itch in your spine, or a memory you didn't agree to remember. That night, you dig a circle in your yard. Not large, not fancy. Just wide enough to sit inside. You place the crescent-shaped stone at the center. You arrange your last remaining onion beside it. You light a single candle. And you wait. The goat shows up first. then the girl who hears colours, then the boy who once fell into a well and claimed he saw the stars swimming. They sit beside you. No one speaks. Above you, the moon finally rises, a perfect crescent, distant, deliberate, watching. You hold up the stone. You whisper, "I'm still here." And the moon, though it never moves, never answers, never even pretends to care, seems just a little brighter for a moment, which is not comfort, but it is something. You don't mean to call it a lawsuit. You don't even know what a lawsuit technically is. You've heard the term tossed around by the merchant who once spent an entire winter indoors arguing with his shadow, and by the scribe who got kicked by a mule and now insists he's owed compensation from the winds. But your idea feels close enough. If a cabbage can be taxed and a chicken can be exercised, then surely the moon can be held accountable for agricultural sabotage. The document takes shape in your mind before it hits the parchment. It begins with formality, to whom the moon may concern. You pause. It feels strong, slightly poetic, definitely doomed. You continue, I, a grower of humble produce and loyal taxpayer, when the mood strikes, do hereby submit a claim of damages against the crescent moon for consistent and repeated acts of horticultural obstruction, atmospheric meddling, and emotional harassment. The ink smudges halfway through, not due to tears that would be too cynatic, but because the candle sputters like it's laughing. You dip the quill again and keep writing. You list your losses: beans, 3 rows, emotionally stunted turnips, quantity unknown, presumed kidnapped 1 onion, witnessed moonlight, has not spoken since, sleep, consecutive nights, interrupted by goat-related omens. You demand resolution. You request either compensation in the form of crops restored, or, at the very least, an official acknowledgement of lunar interference. You close with a flourish and a final line: PS. I am willing to forgive if the moon agrees to never look directly at my property again. You seal it with wax and a thumbprint. You deliver it to the priest's letterbox, which is also the donation bin, and, occasionally, where someone places stale bread they regret baking. No one responds. Not that day. Not the next. The priest avoids eye contact. The blacksmith gives you a small nod, like a fellow warrior in an unwinnable campaign. The baker says, "You're brave," which is definitely not a compliment. Then, quietly, something changes. Your field, still empty, starts attracting visitors, curious ones. A trader from the next town says he heard about the moon suit. A widow asks if you can write a complaint on her behalf against the wind. A child tells you the moon blinked at her, and now she can't stop sneezing. You become, unintentionally, a point of interest. You do not welcome it. Fame feels like someone else's shirt, itchy, ill-fitting, and damp in all the wrong places. But you smile, weakly, and say, "Yes, I filed a claim." The child claps. The widow hands you a small jar of jam. The trader offers you a boot in exchange for moon advice. The moon, of course, does not blink. It rises exactly when expected, crooked and glowing like it always does, no closer, no further, no more generous than before. But now it's being watched. And maybe, just maybe, that makes it blink. Internally. It begins with a suggestion. Not yours, of course. You've made enough suggestions lately to exhaust a mid-sized council. No, this one comes from the scribe, the same one who once tried to patent the concept of thinking too hard, and now sells quills made from suspiciously docile geese. He tells you, over a lentil pastry that has clearly given up on being food, that what you need is a symposium. You nod slowly. Mostly because you don't know what a symposium is, and he's already 2 gestures into explaining it with great enthusiasm and very little structure. From what you gather, it involves chairs, talking, and crucially people pretending they know more than they do. You're in. The scribe insists on posters. He creates them with ink that smells like regret and glue that sticks to everything but paper. He names the event Moonogic, a gathering of affected persons and mildly concerned observers. He adds a decorative border of hand-drawn onions. The symposium is held in the unused corner of the blacksmith's barn, the part too damp for hay and too dry for mould. 7 people attend. You are one of them. The goat is another. The first speaker is a man who believes the moon once stole his hat. He describes it in detail: wool, slightly itchy, last seen during a waxing gibbous. He is still grieving. The second is a woman who claims her dreams go missing every third Wednesday and reappear written in chalk on her fence. The third is the baker, who insists his dough is moon-sensitive and rises best when no one acknowledges the moon exists. You speak last, you keep it short. You tell the story of your crops, your scroll, your vanished turnips. You mention the goat because it is staring at everyone again, and because by now it's essentially your legal counsel. You hold up the crescent-shaped stone. A collective hush follows. It's unclear whether it's awe, confusion, or everyone trying to remember if they left their windows open. Then, discussion. It spirals, of course. Someone proposes painting a mural on the water tower that depicts the moon looking guilty. Someone else suggests writing poetry to confuse the sky. The scribe offers to invent a lunar calendar that skips the crescent entirely, just to see what happens. Nothing is resolved. No one agrees. But everyone leaves with a sense of shared grievance, a rare commodity in a village where most arguments revolve around who moved the bucket. The goat follows you home. You don't mind. It's a quiet companion, and it no longer eats your broom. That feels like progress. You sit by the fire, sipping something that claims to be tea, but smells more like boiled hesitation. The moon isn't out yet, but you know it will be. It always is. Patient, consistent, beautifully detached. And somewhere, maybe, it knows that now you have a group. A strange, meandering, overly dramatic group, but a group nonetheless. You sip again. The tea is worse than expected, but not unearned. The next idea is worse but more fun. It comes, predictably, from the girl who hears colours, now promoted to event coordinator, mostly because no one else was willing to climb the clock tower to hang string lanterns using only twine, optimism, and a questionable grasp of physics. Her proposal, a festival designed specifically to pretend the moon doesn't exist. It's called the Festival of Glorious Indifference. You try to argue that ignoring the moon hasn't worked in the past, especially not when goats, onions, and scrolls are involved. She smiles the kind of smile that suggests a long friendship with chaos and tells you that this time, they'll do it with snacks. You are overruled. Preparations begin immediately. The blacksmith crafts masks shaped like other celestial bodies. The priest agrees to bless anything that does not look like a circle. The baker invents sun cakes, which are just old loaves with raisins arranged into a kind of embarrassed smile. A large cloth is hung between two barns to block the eastern sky entirely. No one is allowed to say moon or glow, or that thing in the sky we keep arguing with. The day arrives with unusual energy. People wear stars in their hair, paint their boots gold, and insist they've never even heard of the word lunar. Children play Don't Look Up, a game that involves walking in a straight line until you crash into something regrettable. There are songs, none of them rhyme. On purpose. You stand near the cider barrel, pretending to enjoy a sun cake. It tastes like chalk that once knew joy. The goat is beside you, wearing a paper crown and chewing a decorative pine cone. You don't question it. You've learned not to. For a while, things go well. People laugh. Someone juggles turnips. The scribe reads a speech about alternative gravitational philosophies that involves a bucket of sand and a melon. You don't understand any of it, but it sounds important, and the melon only rolls away twice. Then the wind shifts. The cloth between the barns flutters. The eastern sky reveals itself. The moon is there. Of course it is. A thin, perfect crescent, shining with the kind of soft confidence that only truly indifferent things can possess. The crowd falls silent. Someone coughs. A child says, "Oops." No one moves for a full minute. Then the girl who hears colours stands on a hay bale and shouts, "ITS a coincidence." Applause follows. Nervous, confused, but sincere. People nod. The goat belches. The music starts again. You sip your cider, which has now warmed into vinegar. You close your eyes. The moonlight brushes your face like a cold joke, told too many times. Later, When the last lantern is out and the last child has stopped spinning, you sit under the empty cider barrel and think, maybe the moon can't be ignored, but maybe it can be mildly insulted with raisins and theatre. You don't smile. But you don't stop it either. The hoe bends. Not in protest, not in accident, it bends as if it's reconsidering its job description. You're in the middle of re-tilling the same patch of reluctant soil you've wrestled with since the turnips disappeared, and now the hoe decides it's too tired to continue. You inspect it. The handle is fine. The metal is dull, but not cracked. It simply droops slightly, like a sigh made out of iron. You straighten it with a rock and pretend not to notice. The shovel is next. It doesn't bend, it disappears. One moment it's beside the fence post, leaning loyally like an obedient dog. The next it's gone, vanished. You find it 3 hours later, inside your neighbour's goose pen, covered in feathers in what you hope is just mashed plum. You retrieve it without explanation. The geese judge you silently, as geese always do. The rake, that spiteful constellation of wooden tines, breaks, not from pressure, you haven't even touched it. You walk past, and it simply gives up, snaps, as though your proximity alone was too much to bear. You begin to suspect your tools have developed opinions. The villagers offer theories. The blacksmith says the moon's light might soften metals if they're emotionally unstable. The priest suggests an exorcism, though he admits he's never performed one on a shovel. The herbalist hands you a pouch of dried celery and says, "Rub this on everything." You try it. It smells like resignation and old soup. The shovel does not respond. That evening, you sit outside with your tools laid out before you like misbehaving children. You stare at them. They don't blink. You try to talk to them. You're not sure what to say. "Please work." Feels too desperate. "I'm sorry for dragging you through centuries of bad farming decisions" feels too accurate. Instead, you polish them with a cloth dipped in vinegar and a little hope. You whisper, "The moon's not here right now," even though you can see its pale arc starting to lift above the hill. The hoe trembles slightly. Or maybe your hand does. The goat joins you. Of course it does. It settles beside the spade like it's mediating a dispute. Later, you attempt one more row of planting. Just one. The shovel digs, slowly, unevenly. But it does. The hoe follows, unenthusiastic but cooperative. The rake stays broken. You plant radishes, not because you like them, but because they're fast. Impatient vegetables. The kind that don't wait around to see who's winning the argument between sky and soil. You whisper encouragement to them. You don't expect it to help, but the ground feels a little less hard tonight. The moon watches. Not with malice, not with approval, just with its usual, unreadable light. Like a teacher auditing a class it forgot it was teaching. You go inside. The shovel is still in your hand. It doesn't try to run. You decide to make one last attempt. Not because you believe it will work. Not because the priest's latest suggestion have you tried apologizing to the sky, filled you with hope. You do it because you're tired of failure without spectacle. If this is going to end with nothing but another bare patch of dirt and a moon that continues to hover with unsettling confidence, then at least you'll go down with some theatrical dignity. You clear a patch of soil behind the house. It's small, slightly shaded, and previously used for drying laundry and banishing uncooperative turnips. You dig carefully, slowly, not with anger, but with that quiet determination that farmers and poets both mistake for faith. The crop, beans. Again, because deep down you're stubborn enough to think they might forgive you. You plant by hand, under a sliver of moon so thin it looks embarrassed to be here. You water them with the last of the barrel. You mark the spot with a stick wrapped in ribbon, not for any reason, but because you think maybe, just maybe, if the moon sees you trying, it'll look away long enough for something to sprout. You wait. 1 day, 2, 7. Nothing. Then on the 8th morning you notice it. A sprout. Small, green, barely a whisper. You kneel beside it. You check the soil. It's damp. The leaf is unbitten. You say nothing to anyone. On the 9th morning, the sprout is gone. No hole, no trace. Just flat dirt and a single pebble, crescent-shaped, resting on the surface, as if the moon sent you a calling card out of pure spite. You pick it up. You laugh. Once the kind of laugh that makes nearby chickens rethink their career paths. Then you go inside. You sit down. You eat a piece of bread so stale it might qualify as sediment. You stare at the window, and the moon, pale and distant and unapologetically whole, stares back. You tried. You filed complaints. You gathered the strange. You held a symposium and hosted a festival. You reasoned with the sky, pleaded with dirt, offered salted prayers, and bribed your tools with celery. Nothing changed. And yet, you placed the stone in a box. A wooden one, old and scarred, the kind normally reserved for coins or secrets. You close it gently. You don't bury it. You keep it on the shelf beside your single remaining onion and the spoon that once predicted rain. That night, the goat sleeps near your door. The wind shifts slightly. The moon rises, slow and radiant, not with vengeance or joy, but with the confidence of a guest who never left. You don't wave. You don't curse. You simply sit, warm cup in hand, and stare into a sky that has never once explained itself. And for the first time, the moon doesn't feel like an enemy. It just feels like something you'll never quite understand. Which, oddly, is a kind of peace. You thought you'd be a scribe. A real one. Ink-stained fingers, soft cushions, important-looking sandals. You imagined yourself reclining slightly as officials whispered your name with a mixture of fear and awe. Instead, you are assigned to clay. Not clean clay. Not noble, elegant, priest-blessed clay. You are assigned to the clay that lives in the outer bins, the grumpy, underhydrated slabs that dry too fast and crack if you even breathe at the wrong angle. You are not allowed a stylus. Not yet. You are given a stick. A short one. Splintered. Bent in a way that suggests past crimes. Practice, they say. Practice what? You're not sure. Your assigned symbol is the one for wheat owed in arrears, which feels personal. Your station is beside a wall. Not under shade, not near water, not near anything interesting. You sit cross-legged in dust that smells like someone else's history, trying to carve straight lines into a tablet that keeps flaking like it's emotionally unavailable. Each mark you make disappears slightly, as if the clay resents your enthusiasm. You try again. It responds with a split down the middle, subtle, but there. A hairline fracture of contempt. The supervisor walks by. He hums. That's all he does. Just hums and glances at your work like it's a disappointing relative who refuses to stop talking during funerals. You ask for feedback. He nods and gives you more clay. Eventually someone gives you a real stylus. You nearly cry. It fits your hand. It doesn't bend. It smells faintly of cedar and misplaced responsibility. You are promoted unofficially to copying numbers from the moon table. This, you are told, is an honor. The moon table is a series of clay records, wide, heavy, slightly warped, that track the moon's cycles across seasons. They are marked with lines, dots, curls, and a system of symbols so tangled that even the older scribes speak of it with reverence and thinly veiled irritation. You begin your first copy. The numbers make no sense. One column refers to brightness, another to mood. One appears to record whether the moon will look kindly on weddings. You squint. That can't be right. But the symbol for look kindly is definitely there, right beside ox sneezes and third month of misfortune. You transcribe anyway. You do not ask questions. You have seen what happens to those who ask questions. They are reassigned to grain storage. Grain storage is hot, smelly, and full of things that burrow. You begin to notice things. Every seventh column, the marks shift slightly, angles lean, symbols tighten. You don't know why. You ask a nearby scribe. He says, "That's when the moon changes its mind." You stare at him. He does not elaborate. Later you walk home. Your hands smell like dust and knowledge you didn't ask for. The moon is visible. You stare at it, trying to guess if it's in a kindly mood. It does not blink. It never does. You nod, out of habit. It doesn't nod back. You realize the moon table doesn't predict the future. It remembers the past in advance. Your cousin visits from the Riverside district. She brings dates, 3 riddles, and a bruised goat. The dates are sweet. The riddles are exhausting. The goat stares at you as if it suspects you of something you haven't done yet. She asks what you do now. You say, "I copy the moon table." She nods slowly, like she's trying to taste the sentence before deciding if it's spoiled. "So you're a moon person now?" she asks, as if that's a category with a wardrobe and a salary. You shrug. The truth is less glorious than it sounds. She asks what the moon table says about love. You hesitate. You recall one line from column 12. If the moon appears before the 6th bowl of barley, the union is firm. If after, prepare a lament. You decide not to quote that. Instead, you say it depends on the ox. She accepts this. She always liked animals more than people. The next morning, she insists on coming with you to the scriptorium. You protest. She insists harder. The goat follows. No one questions it. You arrive early. The clay bins are still sweating from the night heat. Your station smells like old sandals and sun-warm dust. You show her the tablets. She tilts her head. "This one looks grumpy," she says, pointing to a crescent-shaped chip in the edge. You tell her that's not part of the message. She writes it down anyway, in a notebook that's mostly doodles of fish. You point out the column that tracks eclipses. She asks if eclipses make you fall in love or fall in wells. You say both. It depends on whether the ox has been sneezing. She says that makes perfect sense. You're no longer sure if she's joking. Then she asks the question no one ever asks. What does the moon want? You freeze. You have copied 119 tablets. You've scratched numbers into clay until your fingertips itched with dust. You've documented brightness, omens, rainfall patterns, and a startling number of incidents involving bowls tipping over unexpectedly. But you have never once thought to ask what the moon might want. You answer slowly, to be noticed. Maybe. Or maybe it just wants us to think we're the ones noticing. She nods again. She's already sketching a goat in a tunic. That evening, she leaves. The goat refuses to follow. It sits under your tablet shelf like it's preparing for a bureaucratic review. You look at the moon. It's full, round. Less a shape, more a suggestion. You wonder how much of the moon table is true, and how much is just very old wishful thinking, etched into clay before anyone had the courage to admit they were guessing. You whisper, "What do you want?" The moon does not reply, but the goat sneezes once. You mark it down. Not for science. Just in case. You arrive early. Too early. The city hasn't stretched yet, hasn't yawned, hasn't remembered its list of complaints. The guards are asleep with their eyes open. The sun peers over the rooftops like a child spying on grown-ups. And you, unfortunately, are already sweating. You enter the scriptorium. You nod to the clay bins. You mutter to the styluses. You sit cross-legged on your mat, which feels particularly spiky today. The table before you is covered in wax drips, ink ghosts, and one chip shaped suspiciously like a rabbit mid-sneeze. You take a breath. You begin. Today's tablet is new. It smells like warm bread and obligation. You're tasked with copying column 23, the one everyone pretends to understand. It deals with moonlight deviations, behavioral shifts in livestock, and how likely it is for a baby born under a waning gibbous to lose interest in their career before age 7. You try not to read too deeply. You copy carefully, line by line, curve by curve, until something catches. The number is wrong, not slightly, not debatably, utterly, completely, laughably wrong. Instead of 5 units of lunar softness, it reads 17 units of solar regret. That's not even in the same column family. It's like discovering a fish in your bread box fascinating, but also deeply incorrect. You triple check. You fetch the original. You hold both side by side. One says 5. One says 17. You check for smudges. You check for pranks. You check to make sure you didn't dream the entire morning. But no, the number is simply, inexplicably, wrong. You raise your hand. A senior scribe glides over silent, sandaled, suspicious. You explain. He listens. He frowns. He reads. Then, without a word, he brings over 3 more scribes. Now there's a cluster. They're whispering. One nods. One scowls. One starts sketching a goat, which you take as a sign things are spiraling. Finally, the supervisor arrives. He does not whisper. He says, "Who touched the moon table?" Everyone turns to you. You try to explain you didn't touch it. You copied it. You respected it. You even bowed slightly when no one was watching. But they don't care about your respect. They care about the discrepancy. About the 17. A decision is made. They will hold a rereading. This involves incense, chanting, a clay bowl filled with ink and salt, and the one elder who still remembers how to sniff lunar intent from between symbols. He arrives late. He sneezes twice. He declares the number was always 5, and that anyone seeing 17 has been moon blinked. You are told to take 3 days off. Rest, they say. Clear your mind, they say. Stop blinking at numbers like they owe you money, they say. You go home. You stare at your ceiling. The goat has taken your mat. The moon is not even visible tonight, and yet you can feel it, smirking behind the clouds like a prankster with perfect timing. 17, you think. Why 17? You sleep badly. You dream of columns rearranging themselves, of numbers whispering sideways, of the moon drawing goats in the margins when no one is watching. You wake up tired and more curious than ever. On your first day back, someone's left you a gift. It's not wrapped. It's not even clearly meant for you. It's just sitting there, a small, rectangular tablet, shaped too neatly to be accidental. At first glance it appears blank. Then, under the layer of fine dust, you see it. One faint line, a curl, and the symbol for evening misfortune. You squint. Could be a joke. Could be a warning. Could be the leftover doodle of someone whose artistic range includes lines and mild threat. You sit down. You brush the dust off the tablet like it's dandruff on a dinner guest. The day is already too hot. The clay is drying too fast. The ink is sulking in its bowl. You sharpen your stylus against the edge of the table, which responds by splintering just enough to remind you it was never on your side. Your assignment today is menial back copying predictions for lunar alignment with meals. You didn't know the moon table even tracked lunch compatibility, but apparently it does. There are specific days when barley is favoured, others when lentils bring bad luck, and at least one cursed Kai cycle where all bean dishes are to be avoided unless accompanied by ritual humming. You copy line after line. Moon in third arc, fish not advised. Moon under shadow, bread must be torn, not sliced. Moon hums low, avoid stew. Then you see it your birthday. Matched with the words "do not consume onions after midday." You pause. You had onions. After midday, yesterday. You're still alive, you think. You poke your own knee to confirm. It twitches. Maybe the table is wrong. Or maybe you're not the target anymore. Then comes the accident. The scribe next to you spills an entire bowl of ink across 3 fresh tablets. A black wave of authority-ruining sludge slinks across the surface like a shameful tide. He panics. You help. You pat with cloth. You whisper comforting lies. It's not that bad. They'll never notice. Ink is, technically, decorative. The supervisor notices. Naturally. He walks over, silent as a question no one wants to answer. He examines the mess. Then he picks up the mystery tablet, the one with evening misfortune, and holds it aloft like a prophecy fulfilled. You were warned, he says, to no one and everyone. The scribe is sentenced to 2 days of tablet scraping. You are told to meditate. Again. You leave the scriptorium with your shoes full of dust and your mind full of riddles. You eat lentils for dinner, mostly out of defiance. The moon is not visible. You hum, just in case. Later, the wind kicks up, dry and impatient. Your candle flickers. You glance at the shelf where you store your notes. The mystery tablet is there. You didn't bring it home, and yet there it is. You stare at it. It stares back. Or maybe the dust just shifted. You go to bed with a full stomach, a suspicious tablet, and the creeping suspicion that the moon table doesn't predict meals at all. It chooses them. You receive the invitation on a folded scrap of parchment that smells like incense, river mud, and mild panic. The message is brief. The moon table has declared this an auspicious day for union. Come before the second hour. Bring a spoon. You're not related to the bride or the groom. You're not even certain which of them sent the note. The scribe who delivers it says only it was instructed, not by a person, by a column. Column 8, to be exact, the one no one copies anymore because it requires 6 styluses and a belief in romantic fate. It's said to track compatibility between moon phases, shoe sizes, and the number of beetles present at a birth. Most assume it's metaphor. Some treat it as law. The wedding party apparently belongs to the latter category. You consider declining. You have work. You have blisters. You have a go-to-sleep in your doorway. But something about the message nags at you, not the words, but the tone. Like the table knows you skipped lunch and is offering cake as a truce. You go. The wedding takes place near the orchard, beneath a canopy made of woven reeds, dried reeds, and 2 hopeful curtains that flap like reluctant blessings. The bride wears a robe that used to be ceremonial, and now mostly serves as a place for nervous embroidery. The groom looks like he hasn't blinked in an hour. They both stand very still, as if afraid the moon might change its mind mid-vow. You find a seat next to a man chewing on a fig with the expression of someone slowly realizing it's actually a date. The ceremony begins. There is chanting, a bowl of lentils passed in a spiral, and a goat procession. You do not ask why. You clap when others clap. You hum when others hum. Then comes the moment. A tablet is brought forward. Not a fresh one. An old one, chipped, heavy, carried like a holy biscuit. A reader recites from it, on the 12th day of the second arc, beneath a favourable sliver, all vows sealed shall echo well provided the witnesses are odd in number, and at least one wears green. Everyone looks around. You are wearing green. Not intentionally, it's your only clean tunic. You suddenly feel extremely visible. Someone behind you hisses, "Don't move." You're fulfilling the clause. You freeze. The vows are spoken. They rhyme slightly. The goat sneezes at the perfect moment. The bride smiles. The groom finally blinks. The sky darkens in a way that could be called poetic, or threatening, or just late afternoon. Afterwards, there's stew. You forget your spoon. A stranger hands you one, nods solemnly, and says, "The moon provides." You eat quietly. When you return home, your mat is missing. The goat is not. It's asleep with one hoof on the mystery tablet. You stare at it. It doesn't move. You lie on the floor. You stare at the ceiling. You whisper, "That did not feel random." And the ceiling, like the moon, says nothing, while knowing far too much. It begins with an innocent mistake. You are assigned a minor translation, not from a foreign tongue, but from an older form of your own language, a sort of scribal shorthand used back when styluses were carved from bone and metaphors had sharper elbows. The tablet is brittle, faded. It smells like old moss, wet ink, and the kind of regret usually reserved for bad sculpture. You sit with it, carefully. The characters are crooked, the symbols lopsided. You can't tell if the original scribe was rushed, possessed, or deeply sarcastic. One glyph appears to mean moon, but could also mean ladle. Another might signify blessing, or possibly wet goat. You proceed cautiously. Your translation begins simply enough on the night of the 7th curve. The moon danced like a whisper. You pause. That sounds poetic, but dangerously vague. You cross-check it against another tablet and confirm, yes, the same phrase appears. Whisper dancing moon. It's real. Sort of. You continue. Beware the third bowl poured too slowly. That's less poetic, possibly culinary, possibly spiritual. You write it down anyway. The next line is what causes the trouble. If the stars gather, but the moon declines, take not the path with fewer footprints. You blink at it. You copy it. You submit it. And then everything goes sideways. By late afternoon, the scholars are arguing, not quietly, loudly, with scrolls, hand gestures, and at least one broken cup. They've taken your line, your simple, cautious translation, and turned it into a thesis about decision-making, fate, and whether or not the moon prefers introverts. One insists it's a warning about indecision. Another believes it's agricultural. A third is sketching a diagram that involves camel tracks and planetary jealousy. You try to clarify. You say, it might just be metaphor. They shush you. One of them quotes you back to yourself, loudly, incorrectly. By sunset, the phrase is spreading. You overhear two market women debating whether to go left or right because the moon declines. The baker scribbles the line onto his bread shelf. Someone paints it onto the city wall badly, in crooked letters, and with a suspiciously large footprint drawn underneath. You go home confused. You didn't mean to start a philosophy. You meant to finish a tablet. That night, you sit with the original. You reread it under candlelight. The lines are still wobbly. The clay still smells faintly of mildew and mystery. You notice something you didn't before a faint scratch beneath the controversial line. It's not a character. It's a doodle. A small moon, smiling crookedly. You sigh. You whisper, I didn't mean it. The candle flickers. The goat shifts in its sleep. Outside, the moon rises, silver and soft, like an old truth you never agreed to remember. And tomorrow, you will wake to find your quote has been added to the priest's sermon. Uncredited, slightly mangled, unstoppably popular. It comes in the form of a slip, a small clay token, palm-sized, stamped with the mark of the lunar archives and smeared slightly on one corner, as if the person delivering it sneezed mid-approval. You're handed the token by a boy too young to have all his teeth and too confident to care. They said you're being trusted, he says, then runs off without waiting for your reply. You check the token twice. It's real. You've been promoted. You don't know why. It's not your birthday. You didn't bribe anyone. You've spilled only a moderate amount of ink this month. You assume it has something to do with your accidental moon proverb now being painted on carts and sung by children with sticky hands. Apparently, nonsense equals prestige. Your new assignment is located one room deeper past the regular tablets, beyond the humidity-scorched scrolls, and down a hallway that smells like forgotten salt and misplaced confidence. The room is darker, cooler. The scribes here don't talk. They murmur. They nod with the weight of men who carry too many secrets and not enough lunch. You're shown to a tablet labelled Cycle of Reflected Intentions. It is massive, 4 spans wide, 2 thick. It rests on a stone cradle like a very old, very tired animal waiting for one last command. The symbols are unlike anything you've seen, not just curls and marks, but layered glyphs that fold over each other like arguments with punctuation. You are told to copy one line, just one. You begin. It takes an hour. Your stylus slips twice. The third curl fractures near the base, and you have to repair it with wet clay and whispered apologies. A senior scribe passes behind you, snorts softly, and places a fig beside your elbow. It is not encouragement. It is a test. You eat it anyway. By midday you've completed the line. You read it back. If the shadow of the moon arrives early, do not wake the bread. You stare at it. You read it again. You look around for someone to explain. No one makes eye contact. A man 2 mats over is translating a tablet titled Tides and the Emotional Spoilage of Lentils. You do not ask. You copy another line. It reads, on the day of double crescents, sing nothing after the third spoon. You begin to understand why no one speaks here. That evening, you return home with ink on your face, dust in your sleeves, and several unanswered questions rattling in your chest like poorly stacked dishes. The goat greets you with a grunt. The quote you never meant to write is now embroidered onto your neighbour's curtain. You sit. You breathe. You stare at your hands. They don't feel like yours anymore. They feel borrowed. Like the moon itself is just loaning you to history, one glyph at a time. You whisper, I was supposed to be a potter. The moon, high above, blinks. Or maybe that was you. You don't mean to find it. You're just cleaning not by choice, but because your section supervisor has decided that contemplation and dusting should happen simultaneously. Clarity begins at the elbow, he says, handing you a cloth that smells like vinegar and long-standing resentment. So you sweep, you scrub, you sneeze, you shuffle clay shards and sort through the rubble of half-sentences that history gave up on halfway through. And then, behind a crate of weather-warped tablets, and a jar of dried inkstones. You see it flat, pale, and too perfect to belong here. No chips, no smudges. No fungus or scribbled doodles in the margins. A tablet as smooth as still water and just as unsettling. You lift it. It's light. Lighter than it should be. It feels more like an idea than an object. There are only 4 symbols on the surface. The first means arrival. The second means moonlight, though in a form rarely used, poetic, fragile, reserved for lullabies and certain types of weather complaints. The third is unclear. A hybrid glyph, tangled, part begin, part forget, and something else entirely. You stare at it. It stares back. The fourth is blank. Not missing. Not missing. You blink. You check the back. Nothing. You sniff it like a fool. It smells faintly of almonds and something colder than stone. You ask a senior scribe about it. He glances at the symbols and says, "No such tablet exists." Then he walks away faster than someone his age probably should. You ask the archivist. She squints, holds it with 2 fingers like it might leak prophecy, and says, "Put it back." You ask where. She mutters, "Where you didn't find it," and then returns to cataloguing broken ink pots as if nothing just happened. You do not put it back. You take it home. You hide it behind a curtain, beneath the loose floor tile, inside a basket of millet you've been meaning to trade for 3 weeks. It doesn't glow. It doesn't hum. It just waits. That night the moon is full. Too full. You've seen many full moons, pale ones, bloated ones, ones that flicker behind cloud cover like shy gods, but this one feels closer. Not larger, but nearer. Like someone leaning across a table who already knows what you're going to say. You light a candle. The flame bends, not to the breeze, toward the basket. You do not check it. Not yet. You go to bed, wide-eyed, covered in millet dust and doubt. The goat is silent. The wind avoids your window. The night holds its breath like it's waiting for a punchline. In the morning, the tablet is gone. The millet is undisturbed. The tile still loose. The curtain unbothered. But the tablet, the smooth one. The whisper of clay is simply not there. You stare at the empty space and think, not who took it, but what finished it. You eat cold bread. You do not report the loss, because somewhere you suspect the moon has updated its table, and you're now part of it. One morning you arrive to find your mat has been moved forward just slightly, but unmistakably closer to the senior scribes. Your tools are polished, your ink bowl refilled. Your name, which has never been carved into anything before, is now etched onto a small plaque that leans precariously against your satchel like it might fall over at the slightest breeze or incorrect opinion. You are, evidently, being promoted again. This time no one says it aloud. It happens in gestures. The nods are slower. The glance is more calculating. The boy who delivers midday lentils calls you instructor, then stares at your elbow like it might start glowing. You try to correct him. He insists he's not wrong. You check your elbow. It looks normal. You remain unconvinced. Then someone brings you a student. She's about 12, possibly 13. She has a stylus made of sharpened bone and a smile made of mischief, and extremely good hearing. "They said you'd show me how to read the moon table," she says. You freeze. No one has shown anyone how to read the table in years. Not formally. It's passed along like a family rumour or a cooking trick that no one fully trusts. The table is not taught. It's endured. Still, you nod. You sit beside her. You roll out a practice tablet. It's cracked, faintly mouldy, and smells like old soup, and unresolved arguments are classic. You point to the first line. This symbol means harvest. She nods. She copies it. Then she adds 3 tiny dots above it. You ask why. She says it feels more correct. You tell her the table doesn't feel. She raises an eyebrow. You continue. This one here tracks eclipses. This one is for missing time. This one refers to dreams you can't remember until someone says the word cabbage. She writes it all down. Then she asks the question, "Do you believe it?" You pause. Not because you don't have an answer, but because you have too many. Do you believe in a table that once declared a spoon unlucky? Do you believe in crescent moons that cause onions to vanish? Do you believe in tablets that disappear after being hidden under millet? Do you believe that the goat outside your door is more scribe than pet? You look at her. She waits. You say, I believe the table listens. It's the safest truth you can offer. She nods. She draws a tiny moon in the corner of the tablet. Not the official symbol, her own version. Round, uneven, smiling with too many teeth. Later you're told she's been reassigned. Not as punishment, as recognition. Apparently her addition, the 3 dots, has now been seen in another, older tablet. One no one can explain. You go home. The goat is chewing on a fig it didn't have earlier. You don't ask questions anymore. That night you dream of a table. Not the moon table. Your table. Carved into soft stone. Covered in dots you don't remember writing. And somewhere in the sky something shifts. You arrive to find the moon column erased, not smudged, not rewritten, not accidentally water damaged by someone carrying too many soup bowls through the archive again. No, it's gone. Smooth clay. A clean rectangle carved from what was once a record of predictions, warnings, and oddly specific wedding advice involving poultry. You stare at the blank space. Your fingers twitch. The other scribes avoid your eyes. One of them coughs in the manner of someone trying to release guilt through sound. The supervisor walks by quickly, muttering something about intentional clarity. You are not convinced. You approach the tablet directly. It's still warm, not with heat, but with attention, as if someone had just looked at it very hard. Or maybe as if the moon itself passed a finger over the surface and decided the content no longer pleased it. You ask a question no one wants to hear. Who cleared it? No one answers. Someone drops a stylus. Someone else pretends to be asleep. You hear the goat bleat faintly in the distance, as if offering legal counsel. Later, the senior scribe declares that the column needed renewal. When pressed, he clarifies that renewal is a sacred tradition, reserved for moments when knowledge outgrows itself. You wonder if that's a phrase or just an excuse wrapped in poetic linen. They assign you to rewrite it. Of course they do. You sit in front of the blank clay. It looks too clean, like a page that's dared you to begin something important and will definitely judge your first sentence. You dip your stylus. You pause. You don't know what to write. You know the symbols. You've spent years copying columns about when not to bake, how to plant while crying, and what shape the moon must be before it's safe to mention someone's birthday. But now, with no model and no reference, you realize you don't actually know what the table wants. You write one symbol, wait. Then another, moon. Then a pause. You add the symbol for probably. It feels honest. You leave the rest blank. The next day, no one erases it. No one adds to it. The tablet stays that way, unfinished, unresolved, breathing quietly like something learning to sleep. Word spreads. People visit. They whisper. They nod. One man brings a flower and places it before the tablet, like it's a particularly ambiguous tomb. A child writes the word "why" in the dust beside it. The archivist, without comment, leaves a spoon on top. That night you walk home slowly. The sky is cloudy. The moon hides. Or maybe it's giving you space. You sit on your mat. The goat places its head on your foot. The air is thick with the kind of silence that only comes when everyone agrees not to ask the obvious question. You don't rewrite the tablet. You let it stay blank. Because maybe, for once, that's the most accurate thing the moon table has ever said. You are not usually summoned. You're a scribe. You work with clay, dust, and opinions that are only occasionally correct. Your day involves symbols, cracks, and the occasional goat stealing your lunch. No one summons a person like that. They tap you gently. They gesture politely. They ask without quite meaning it. So when the messenger arrives, clean tunic, straight spine, sandals that don't squeak, and says, "The Duke requires your attendance," you assume it's a mistake. Maybe they meant the baker. Maybe they meant the goat. But no, your name is on the scroll. Spelled correctly, even. That's how you know it's serious. You wash your face. You forget your sandals. You return for them. You walk through the streets with that careful posture reserved for people who suspect they've already done something wrong but haven't been told what it is yet. The palace is tall, sunlit, and disappointingly clean. It smells like lemon oil, polished nerves, and meat you can't afford. You are led not to the throne room, but to a narrow chamber lined with scrolls and a single window cut in the shape of a crescent moon. It casts light with unsettling precision, landing directly on a low writing desk made of cedar and ambition. The Duke is not present. Instead, his steward, a man with perfect eyebrows and no discernible blood pressure, hands you a small clay tablet. His Grace wishes to verify the next appropriate evening for a duel, the steward says. You stare. The tablet is unmarked. Blank, save for a faint smudge in the corner that might once have been a thumbprint or a very lazy crescent. You ask if there's a date to consider. The steward says no, just a mood. You are to read the moon. You do not argue. You nod like a professional. You take the tablet. You are offered a stylus that's cleaner than your kitchen. You sit. The steward watches. The moon, which is not visible but very much implied, also watches. You begin to calculate. According to the moon table, the best days for a duel are those when the moon is waxing, but not quite gibbous bold enough to witness blood, shy enough to keep secrets. The weather must be clear. The third star to the left of the northern hinge must be visible. The previous duel must not have ended in laughter. You write third night following the next curve, weather permitting, preferably before bread is broken. The steward reads your words. He nods. He takes the tablet and leaves you in the chamber, alone with the window and the unsettling accuracy of your own guess. Later, in the courtyard, a noble practices swordplay under the shadow of a fig tree. You are not told the outcome. You are not asked to attend. You are, however, given a small pouch of coins and a basket of pears that smell like apology. You eat one. It's ripe. The moon, when it rises that evening, appears exactly as you described, and that is somehow more unnerving than if it hadn't. It begins with a cake. Not for you, of course. You are still a person whose meals come mostly in the form of lentils, apologies, and whatever the goat didn't finish. But the cake arrives nonetheless, wheeled in on a cart by a servant whose hat is taller than your ambitions, and whose job title appears to be assistant scheduler of the evening atmosphere. You're handed a scroll. On it, a request. The Duchess intends to host a feast beneath the full moon. Kindly confirm the appropriateness of the date, based on lunar favour, historical harmony, and whatever else you people do. You people, that's you now. You're not entirely sure how your job shifted from copying smudged warnings about mildew and fish to moon feast validation, but the court is full of decisions made by people with too much power and not enough hobbies. You pull out the moon table. Column 9, festivity permission. Cross-referenced with column 11, social harmony indicators. A moon that is fully round and brightly smug is technically suitable provided the following conditions are met: no recent funerals involving anyone named after birds, no sightings of two-headed livestock within 10 miles, no pickled eels served during the previous lunar cycle, and absolutely no mentions of the purple comet. Even in jest, you ask a few questions. The steward checks. There were no recent bird funerals. The livestock count remains pleasingly normal. The cook denies all eel-related allegations. But someone the steward admits did mention the comet. Twice. While laughing. You sigh. You write full moon favourable. Minor omens noted. Proceed with caution. Do not serve anything purple. You think that should be the end of it. But you are, regrettably, wrong. The Duchess sends back a note. It reads, the moon is round. The guests are ready. Your hesitation is provincial. You're not entirely sure if that's an insult or a compliment. You consider clarifying. You don't. Instead, you adjust the moon table entry to include the phrase, warning issued. Feast proceeded against better judgment. That night, the feast begins. The moon is perfect. Too perfect. Suspiciously symmetrical. It hangs over the courtyard like a coin waiting to be flipped. The guests arrive in velvet and exaggerated laughter. Musicians pluck at stringed instruments with an air of practiced desperation. And then the swan explodes. Not literally, but very close. The centerpiece, a roasted swan stuffed with herbs and theatrical arrogance, collapses under its own weight and sprays its contents across three nobles and the violinist. The moonlight catches it just right. The effect is both dazzling and disgusting. No one is injured. Except the mood. You are not present, but you hear about it within minutes. By morning, the tale spreads. The moon was angry. The goat refused to blink. Someone heard the comet laughing. The Duchess sends another note. It says, "Next time, say no properly." You hang the message above your mat. It flutters at night when the wind shifts. So does your opinion of cake. It starts with lace. Yards of it. Piled high on a servant's arms like decorative seafoam with opinions. She appears at your door before breakfast, which is bold. She says nothing at first, just stares, as if waiting for your eyes to adjust to the sheer volume of fabric. Then she hands you a scroll tied in lavender ribbon and smelling faintly of sugar and urgency. The note reads, "The Lady Estrella wishes to wed beneath the waxing moon. Please confirm if this is acceptable for eternal devotion, ceremonial harmony, and gift reception." Gift reception, you think. That's a new one. You open the moon table. Page torn, as usual. A smear of jam in the corner from last week's prophecy of bad stew. You locate column 14, matrimonial appropriateness. It's a delicate column. It begins, "Do not wed under the new moon, unless seeking short-term clarity and long-term regret." You skim further. Waxing moon. Acceptable if one partner has recently dreamt of fish and the other has successfully mended cloth within a fortnight. You are not certain these criteria are being met, but neither are most marriages. You ask to speak to the bride. You are told she is meditating with flower arrangements. You ask to speak to the groom. You are told he is sword fighting a curtain rod to prepare for commitment. You nod, mostly out of politeness. Then comes the moon. You step outside to confirm the phase. Waxing. Confident. Suspiciously well defined. You feel watched. Not in a malicious way, more like a supervisor who already filled out your evaluation and is just waiting for you to discover your mistakes. You return and write waxing moon appropriate. Ensure fish dream confirmation. Avoid dramatic gestures until after dessert. The wedding proceeds. You are, inexplicably, invited. The ceremony takes place in a courtyard full of candles, silence, and guests attempting not to faint from perfumed air. The Lady Estrella wears enough silver to qualify as a minor celestial body. The groom, visibly nervous, holds his bouquet like it's a small animal that might flee or explode. The vows are lovely, if slightly off rhythm. Then comes the wind, a gentle gust at first, then a stronger one. Candles flicker. Fabric flaps. A long scroll of vows tied lovingly with lavender thread lifts into the air and sails skyward with a kind of poetic determination rarely seen in paper. The moon, full now, peeks through a cloud. It glows. Not brightly, just noticeably. Enough for the guests to glance up. The ceremony pauses. A bird lands in the soup. A goat not yours, but professionally affiliated, eats the ring pillow. You are not blamed. Not openly. But that evening, the moon table receives a new edition note, waxing moon suitable. But do not upstage it. You copy the entry with care. The lace is still in your doorway when you return. You do not move it, because some symbols are better left undisturbed. It begins with shouting. Not the messy kind, no flailing, no insults about mothers or shoe size, but the formal, well-enunciated kind that happens when two nobles have memorized the same etiquette book and intend to weaponize it against each other. You're seated in a side hall, summoned for archival observation, which turns out to mean sitting very still while the Duke and his cousin debate whether next Thursday is suitable for a public declaration of family triumph. The cousin insists the moon will be waning. The Duke insists the moon does not matter. You, unhelpfully, know that both of them are wrong. You try to speak once. The steward coughs in a way that clearly means don't. So you sit and listen and observe the slow unravelling of logic in silk. The Duke says, "Our banner shall fly at noon." The cousin replies, "Not if the moon is in retreat." The Duke narrows his eyes. The moon doesn't retreat. It reclines. The cousin smirks. It recoils, like a sensible guest from your cook's stewed garlic. At this point, a servant enters with a tray of candied nuts and leaves before anyone can drag him into the metaphor. Eventually, someone remembers you're in the room. "Bring the moon table," the cousin says. "No," the Duke says. "Yes," the cousin insists. The Duke glares. "Very well. Let the scribbler declare which of us the moon prefers." You are not paid enough for this, but you nod and unfurl the scroll. Column 6, Announcements and Proclamations. Subset 3, Triumphs, Boasts, and Minor Heraldic Celebrations. It reads, "Declare nothing important while the moon wanes." It hears less and remembers less. You read it aloud, quietly, as if hoping the table will backtrack mid-sentence. The Duke frowns. The cousin smiles. The steward sighs with the wariness of someone whose entire life is scheduling around powerful people who dislike both clocks and advice. "Very well," the Duke says. "We will postpone, but tell the moon I do so under protest." You are not entirely sure how to respond to that. You consider a salute. You settle for a nod. The cousin offers you a candied nut as tribute. You accept it, mostly because your lunch was replaced earlier by a scroll of lunar tides and a bowl of lukewarm disappointment. The moment passes. The scroll is re-rolled. You leave quietly, with nut in pocket and dignity mostly intact. That night, the moon is visible again, pale, tilted, and looking somewhat smug. You wonder if it did, in fact, overhear the argument. You wonder if it cares. You wonder if it finds the title Duke as funny as you do. You lie on your mat, staring at the ceiling. Outside, a single cloud drifts past the moon. It pauses, moves on. You whisper, "He postponed," like passing along a royal message. The moon does not reply. But the wind just barely feels pleased. This time, it's not a messenger. It's not even a steward. It's a noble herself, Lady Amalda of the house with too many spoons, who arrives at your table just after dusk, trailing silk, perfume, and unresolved drama. She stands in your doorway without knocking, as if doors are more of a suggestion than a rule. She holds a fan. She does not use it to cool herself. She uses it to point at things, primarily you. You, she says, are the one who knows what the moon allows. You glance at your tablet. It says something about turnips and regret. You close it slowly. You nod. She enters. The room becomes smaller. "There is to be a duel," she says, folding the fan with a sound like a judgment being sealed. "A matter of honor, or dessert. Depending on which version you heard." You blink. You wait. She continues. "Sir Davrin has offended Lord Pell by refusing his pear custard." The refusal was delivered with raised eyebrows. Possibly sarcastic. You nod again. Slowly. "The matter has escalated. A duel has been proposed for the morning. I require lunar clarity. Is the time suitable for vengeance?" You retrieve the moon table. Column 10. Acceptable hours for interpersonal bloodshed. Subset B. Sweet-based provocations. You scan. There it is. Avoid duels at dawn under waning moons unless offence involved apples, dishonored salt, or direct comparisons to livestock. You explain this carefully. "So," she says, "pear is not covered." "Not explicitly," you reply. She considers, then smiles. "Then they shall proceed, and if it ends in tragedy, we'll update the column." You try to object. She's already gone. The next morning, the city is quiet in that odd, polite way it becomes when nobles are doing something incredibly loud. You are not invited to the duel, but you hear it from your window, a distant clang, a yelp, and a splash that suggests someone misjudged the depth of the decorative pond. By noon, the gossip arrives. Sir Davrin's sword snapped. Lord Pell tripped over a goose. No blood was shed, but egos were thoroughly bruised, and one very elegant coat now smells permanently of pondweed. A servant delivers a note. It reads, "The moon table has been amended. Peer offences qualify only if served warm." You copy it, reluctantly. That evening, a parcel arrives. Inside, a pear tart, still warm, tied with a ribbon and a note that says, "Thank you for your caution." You eat the tart. It's surprisingly good. The kind of good that almost justifies property damage. The moon is nearly invisible that night, a sliver, faint and crooked, like a smile held in reserve. You wonder if it's tired, or merely amused. You lie down. You dream of pears, jewels, and fan-wielding nobles updating ancient scrolls while sipping wine they didn't pay for. And in the dream, the moon watches from behind a curtain, not judging, just recording. She arrives mid-afternoon, escorted by a nervous assistant and 3 decorative birds. The birds are caged but look like they might have opinions. The noble is dressed in layered silk dyed in varying shades of storm anxiety slate, dusk, and the colour of an argument no one wins. Her name is Lady Florian, and she believes the moon is following her. Not metaphorically, not romantically, literally. You are halfway through cataloguing a scroll that tracks lunar influence on soup spoilage when she sits directly across from you and declares, "It watched me bathe." You blink. She leans in. "Last night, I was in the courtyard. The moon rose. It stared. Then I turned left. It followed. I turned right. It followed harder. You clear your throat. That's how the moon works." She narrows her eyes, as if you've just accused her favourite scarf of treason. "Do you know," she says, "how many moons I've seen?" You do not. 37. You nod respectfully. She continues. "This one is different. This one lingers." You attempt to explain lunar phases. You mention orbits. You sketch, with a very unimpressive charcoal stub, the predictable rhythm of celestial mechanics. She listens, then waves dismissively. No, it's not orbiting. It's hovering, and it disapproves. You ask why she believes that. She produces a list. It's written in gold ink on linen parchment, and includes the following items. The moon appeared during 3 separate picnics. It glared during a harp recital. It dimmed when she complimented a rival's hair. It has never once winked, which she finds suspicious. You read the list twice. You do not laugh. You do not sigh. You say, "That is indeed compelling." She presses forward. "What does the moon table say about personal persecution?" You flip. There's no exact column for that. Closest you find is column 17, illusions, paranoia, and misinterpretations of shadow. You quote, "When the moon is too present, look not upward but inward." She frowns. "That sounds judgmental." You nod. It often is. She stands. "Tell the moon I'll be indoors." You don't tell her that the moon has windows. That evening, the sky is clear. The moon hangs in that familiar, quiet way it always does, not chasing, not fleeing, simply there. You feel no particular message in its glow. You still avoid looking at it directly. You hear, later, that Lady Florian has covered her balcony with painted cloth. It features clouds, stars, and a smiling sun, all carefully drawn to face away from her. You imagine the moon seeing that and shrugging. You add a note to the scroll. Some nobles require the moon's absence more than its guidance. The goat, outside your window, sneezes. You choose not to interpret it. It starts with a whisper, not to your ear, but past it. A court servant, pale tunic, frayed belt, shoes that sound like fabric, trying not to offend the floor, walks behind you and drops a folded note onto your tablet. He doesn't stop. You wonder if he's real or just a symptom of too many sleepless nights cataloguing lunar etiquette violations. The note reads, "Come tonight. Do not tell the steward. There will be stew." It's unsigned. You fold the note. You finish your work half-heartedly, translating a section of the moon table on favourable evenings for embroidery and passive-aggressive apologies. You try not to think about the banquet. You fail. By sundown, curiosity wins. The location is unfamiliar, not the palace, not the archive, but an unused courtyard behind the western kitchens. You arrive and find nobles already seated at uneven wooden tables. Their robes are lighter, their expressions looser, and not one of them is pretending the moon doesn't matter. There are lanterns, there's laughter, there's a dog wearing a wreath. You spot Lady Amalda slicing bread with the kind of intensity usually reserved for revenge. Someone plays a flute badly but with sincerity. You take a seat. Then you realize this is not a sanctioned event. You ask a guest a lord with jam on his cuff and joy in his eyes who planned the gathering. He grins and points upward. The moon did. You blink. Column 15, he adds. Unacknowledged lunar desires. You don't remember that column. He explains, sometimes the moon wants us to stop pretending. No heralds. No dates. Just light and food and people willing to look up. The stew arrives. It smells of root vegetables, herbs and a slight hint of rebellion. You eat. You listen to stories. Someone swears they once saw the moon wink. Someone else argues the moon can't wink. It can only nod. A third insists the moon smiled at them during childbirth, but only after the third child. You don't contribute. You just watch. Then the cloud moves. The moon emerges full, round, not commanding, but present. The table goes quiet. For a moment even the dog seems reverent. Lady Floriane is not here. The goat is. No one knows why. Someone toasts. To the moon, they say, for showing up when we didn't ask, and disappearing when we need space. You nod. Later, as people leave, a noble leans in and whispers, "Don't mention this to the steward." He thinks the moon is a logistical threat. You promise nothing. You return home with a belly full of stew, a brain full of flickering stories, and a quiet certainty that the moon table might not include everything. Some nights write themselves. You update the margin sometimes. The moon permits what the steward forbids. You underline it twice. The goat sneezes on your shoes. You say thank you. It starts, as many bad ideas do, with a meeting. You are summoned to the administrative chamber, a long room filled with scrolls, suspicion, and chairs that were designed for discomfort. The steward is there. So are 3 clerks, 1 legal advisor, and a man who may be a noble or possibly just dressed like one for dramatic effect. The topic is urgent, you're told. Lunar ambiguity, interpretive gaps, discrepancies in column spacing. You are handed a complaint. It reads Lord Bertrand claims his property line extends 12 paces farther under the waxing moon, and therefore includes the east-facing fig tree previously believed to be shared. You blink. They stare. Someone clears their throat with bureaucratic gravity. This is now a question of moonlight law, the steward says. We require clarification. Official clarification. You try to protest. You explain that the moon table does not, in its current version, address property disputes by reflected illumination. The steward replies, then update it. You realize what this means. They're asking you, who once catalogued mold on papyrus and corrected someone's spelling of turnip to invent a law. You stall. You reference column 19, moonlight and its symbolic authority. A vague, poorly copied section that includes such useful lines as a full moon implies fullness, but only emotionally, and do not weigh goats by its light. You ask if there was ever a precedent. The legal advisor opens a dusty box containing a single parchment. Moonlight may bless weddings, but not boundary stones. The date is smudged. The ink is weeping. You sigh. Then, carefully you write property influenced by moonlight shall remain unchanged in practical terms, unless said light is witnessed by at least 3 neutral parties, one of whom must be chewing. They accept this. No one questions the chewing. The meeting dissolves into agreement. A clerk begins transcribing your words into official record. The steward nods approvingly, as if the moon has been tamed by phrasing. You are given a fig as thanks. It is underripe. Later that night, Lord Bertrand files an objection. He claims the 3 witnesses during his moonlit land survey were chewing. Unfortunately, 2 were chewing the same thing, and the 3rd was only considering chewing. This, apparently, is insufficient. The fig tree remains communal. You revise the entry chewing must be audible, continuous, and of individual substance. Speculative mastication does not count. You underline speculative. The next day someone paints that sentence on a barn. You pretend not to notice. That evening you walk past the fig tree. It looks exactly the same, lopsided, quiet, and entirely unaware it was the subject of legal debate under celestial scrutiny. The moon is out. It glows indifferently. You nod to it. It does not nod back. but the wind, brushing the fig leaves just enough to count as chewing, does seem to whisper something. And for once, you don't try to write it down. It's well past midnight when the knock comes. Not a frantic knock. Worse, a polite one. The kind of knock that means someone took the time to be precise about the inconvenience they're causing. You answer the door with sleep still in your teeth, and a blanket draped over your head like a ceremonial hood of resignation. It's a page, young, slightly damp, holding a lantern and a scroll and worried look that suggests someone important is doing something messy. He says, "The Countess is in labour. They want to know if the moon approves." You don't ask who they are. You already know. They are the collection of cousins, wet nurses, and minor nobility who suddenly believe celestial opinion matters when screams begin and inheritance is involved. You dress. You follow. The path to the manor is lit by torches and anxiety. A maid greets you at the gate and waves you in like a gust of wind with arms. Inside, everything smells of boiled water and whispered fear. You are not led to the birth chamber. Of course not. You are sent to the observatory, a narrow tower with too many stairs and not enough chairs. A scribe is already there, charting cloud positions and muttering about wind angles. You take your place beside him. You wait. The moon does not appear. Clouds cover everything. Not dramatically, just with the bland persistence of sky refusing to cooperate. The birth is underway. The shouts from below come in waves, followed by silence thick enough to eat. The steward arrives. He says, "They need a verdict." You point upward. There's no moon. He says, "But what would the moon have said?" You sigh. You consult the moon table. Column 20, lunar absence and interpretive substitutions. It includes guidance such as if no moon appears, seek reflection in water. If no water, consult the nearest mirrored surface. If no reflection occurs, trust the mood of nearby animals. You glance out the window. No puddles. No mirrors. One owl. It blinks once, then flies away. You decide that's close enough. You declare the moon was hesitant, but has chosen not to object. This is relayed downward like gospel wrapped in gauze. You remain in the tower until the cry comes sharp, undeniable, tired but alive. A girl. The steward returns with a nod. She came under moon's silence. They're naming her after it. You ask which name. Stillness. You write it down. Later you descend the tower. The torches are low. The air is cool. The stars have reappeared, uncertainly. The moon peeks through one last drifting sheet of cloud. It glows faintly, as if apologizing for its delay. You nod once, quietly. Then you go home, wrap yourself again in the blanket of reluctant ceremony, and fall asleep wondering if anyone will ever ask what the moon thinks of you, and whether silence is sometimes the kindest answer. You're not sure who arranged it. One morning, you simply find yourself summoned again, a different seal on the scroll, a different servant at the door, a different tone in the message. Not urgent, not reverent, just quiet, like someone requesting tea after an argument. The location is unfamiliar. Not the palace, not the tower. It's a small stone pavilion outside the city walls, half covered in ivy and fully covered in dust that doesn't belong to anyone. The kind of place that was once important, and then gently forgotten, like a birthday you meant to remember. There's a chair, there's a table, and there's a noble older, quieter, with a face like melted parchment, and fingers that twitch when the breeze passes. He doesn't introduce himself. He just gestures for you to sit. You do. He says, "I've read every moon table entry for the past 40 years, including the one about chewing." You nod. That one still makes you nervous. He continues, "But the problem isn't the table, is it? The problem is the moon doesn't explain itself." You don't answer. Not yet. He leans forward, voice low. "So, what do you believe?" It's not a challenge, not even a curiosity. It's something softer, like a question that's been waiting decades to be asked, and will wait decades more if needed. You look up. The sky is pale, the moon faint, but visible, a soft smear of light, drifting through the morning as if it overslept and doesn't want to be noticed. You realize it's been there the whole time. You just hadn't looked. You speak slowly. I believe the moon listens. He nods. You go on. I believe it reflects more than it gives, that it waits quietly for us to invent meanings and then accepts them, even the foolish ones. Especially the foolish ones. He chuckles. You add, I believe it never interrupts. He leans back. And that's enough for you. You consider. Then, no. But it's all I have. There's a pause. Not a heavy one. Just enough to settle between the ivy leaves. He hands you a slip of paper. It reads, the moon does not decide, but it remembers. You're not sure if it's his writing or yours or something older. You leave the pavilion. The city buzzes in the distance. A goat bleats in the far-off tone of professional disapproval. You return to your mat, to your ink, to the ever-expanding moon table that is now mostly footnotes and slightly unhelpful clarifications. You add a new one. Column 21, belief. If asked, tell the truth. Even if it sounds like metaphor, especially then. That night, the moon rises late. Not because it's forgetful, because perhaps it wanted to hear what you'd say first. So, you made it to the end. You followed the moon through superstition, celebration, quiet laws, and noisier stew. You've watched it vanish at childbirth, attend banquets uninvited, delayed duels, and silently approve fig trees. It never said a word. But somehow it always had the last one. Thank you truly for staying until the end. If your eyes are still open, let them drift now, like the moon through a soft cloud bank. And if you're already asleep, then perhaps the moon got what it wanted all along your quiet attention, without the questions. There will be another day, another cycle, and you know it will repeat tomorrow, as it always does.